Inside the research lab, I accidentally had a bout of morning sickness. The people around me quickly helped me to a chair so I could rest. Then, one after another, they started asking, "Aren't you pregnant? Why are you still coming to work? Where's the baby's father? How could he let you come out alone? That's so irresponsible. Professor, don't you think so?" The professor locked eyes with me and spoke slowly, emphasizing each word. "The baby's father just found out too. He's really that irresponsible." Huh. No wonder people always say dating classmates or coworkers is a bad idea. Breaking up is awkward enough. Divorce? Even worse. Yesterday, I had just picked up my divorce certificate from the Civil Affairs Bureau. I had imagined the moment to be like a dramatic movie scene. Heavy rain pouring down. My soon-to-be ex-husband and I locking eyes. Me throwing out a cold "we'll never see each other again" before turning away, leaving him with a regretful silhouette to remember forever. But reality? Yesterday was a bright, sunny day. Not just any day. Qixi Festival. Chinese Valentine's Day. The Civil Affairs Bureau was packed with couples registering for marriage, all holding hands, their faces glowing with happiness. When they heard we were there for a divorce, the staff gave us the weirdest looks. All I could do was smile awkwardly. But what could I do? Our 1-month cooling-off period had landed exactly on this date. And besides, who says you can't get divorced on Qixi? The cowherd and weaver girl still have to part ways after tonight, don't they? Finally, I got the divorce certificate. There was no dramatic rainstorm, but I still struck a victorious pose, lightly tapping the document against James Carter's hand. "Goodbye, ex-husband. Never seeing you again." Nope. He shut me down without hesitation. For a second, thought maybe, just maybe, seeing the divorce certificate had finally made him panic. But in the next moment, he pulled me back to reality. "Tomorrow's a work day. You still have to go to work. No one's going to wake you up anymore. Don't be late for the 9 a.m. clock in." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving behind a cool and composed silhouette. Damn it. He actually one-upped me. Messing with me? He must think I'm easy to push around. Before, I could at least stop him from coming into my bedroom. Now, I could only endure it. The next morning, I barely made it to work on time. Right as I clocked in, I ran into James downstairs. He only gave me a brief glance before turning and heading upstairs. All right, fine. He was even more indifferent than me. Honestly, though, our situation wasn't as awkward as it could have been. Because, in reality, no one even knew we had been married. Looking back on our relationship, it had always been me chasing after him. He just passively accepted it. Back in senior year of high school, I fell for him at first sight when he transferred in. Somehow, he managed to make our school's outdated blue and white uniform look amazing. That alone set him apart. To be with him, I studied until 3 a.m. every night just to get into the same university. Then, I kept chasing him through college. He had rejected me before, but he did it so gently. "Sorry, my family is poor. I don't deserve you." Oh, come on. That wasn't a rejection. It was an invitation. Instead of discouraging me, it just made me more determined. "That's not true. You're the best person in the world." If he had just once said something harsher, like, "Who do you think you are?" I might have given up. But no. He was too good-looking. Too smart. He was already guaranteed university admission before finishing high school. Once in college, he kept winning competitions, scholarships. He made success look effortless. As someone who valued both brains and looks, I was completely trapped. So, I kept chasing. From high school to grad school. From graduation to the research institute. 10 years. 10 whole years of my youth spent chasing after James Carter. And now, I was exhausted. I had almost been late today. The bus only stopped outside the research institute, leaving me with another 800 meters to sprint. By the time I made it into the elevator, I was doubled over, panting, clutching my stomach. The reflective surface of the elevator wall caught my eye. Behind me, James was staring. Actually, it wasn't just him. Everyone in the elevator was staring at me. Maybe because I was the only one gasping like a dying dog. "Are you okay?" Emily, the new girl, a junior colleague, patted my shoulder to help me catch my breath. The moment she touched me, my stomach flipped. I couldn't stop myself from crouching down, dry heaving. Right then, the elevator doors opened. A group of balding senior researchers, all holding stacks of academic papers, were just about to step in, only to see me kneeling on the floor, gagging. One of them turned pale and yelped, "Quick, quick, quick, help her up." It wasn't even New Year's yet, and I already wanted to flip him off. Was this really the time for sarcasm? I was dry heaving so badly that I could barely catch my breath, my vision growing blurry. Just then, someone reached out from behind and grabbed my wrist. "Stand up first. Don't let your stomach cramp up too much." James Carter steadied me and pressed his thumb on a pressure point on my wrist. Almost instantly, the nausea eased significantly. "Liam, go get some water. Zoe, grab a piece of bread from my locker." His voice was steady, giving orders like it was second nature. The two interns immediately ran off to fetch the items. I often had stomach issues. Every time it acted up, even before I could say anything, James would step in and start massaging the right pressure points. His grandfather had been a traditional Chinese medicine doctor, and over the years, he had learned quite a bit. Once, my mom had seen this and laughed. "Wow, Emily, you two are really in sync. Looks like even a hiccup from you, and James already knows what's wrong." I took a deep breath, sitting on a nearby bench. He stood beside me, still holding my wrist. "Did you eat breakfast?" he asked. "Yeah, I made it myself." The second the words left my mouth, we both fell silent. We both knew exactly what that meant. Back on our first wedding anniversary, I had insisted on cooking for him. I made a fried egg, burnt to a crisp on the outside but still runny inside. For the first time, James had been at a complete loss for words. After a long pause, he had finally forced out, "This egg is interesting. Quite the research subject. The outside is carcinogenic, and the inside is full of salmonella." Since then, he had been the one cooking throughout our entire marriage. After the divorce, I had thought I could finally go back to being myself. But as it turned out, even something as simple as breakfast had become a challenge. "Emily, have some water." The interns returned, one holding a glass of water, the other a piece of bread. I took a sip, but before I could swallow, another wave of nausea hit me, and I ended up spitting the water all over James's shirt. The interns panicked and rushed to grab tissues. He was still holding my wrist when I instinctively pulled my hand back and waved dismissively in the air. "I don't think pressing the pressure points is working anymore. Emily, this doesn't seem like a stomach issue. Could you be pregnant?" I froze on the spot, staring at the intern who had just spoken. She looked back at me, her voice hesitant. "My sister-in-law was just like this when she first got pregnant." Within less than a morning, rumors about me being pregnant spread like wildfire. By lunchtime, several co-workers had gathered around me, checking in with concerned expressions. "Are you really pregnant? If you're pregnant, why are you still coming to work? Where's the father? How could he let you come alone?" I had a good relationship with my colleagues, so their concern felt genuine. James, along with a few of his students, stood nearby as people bombarded me with questions. One of the younger women muttered under her breath, "Seriously, what an irresponsible man." Then she turned to James and asked, "Professor, don't you think so?" I turned around just in time to see James standing outside the window, watching me. His gaze was steady as he spoke, enunciating each word carefully. "The baby's father just found out too. He's really that irresponsible." Huh. No one quite understood what he meant, and he didn't bother explaining. Instead, he simply told me to step outside. As I followed him into the hallway, I kept my head down. For some reason, I felt guilty. Maybe because, thinking back, in those last few times, I had been the one insisting on trying new things, and in the end, neither of us really remembered whether we had been careful or not. "Are you really?" He had just started to speak when our HR manager suddenly rushed over. "Emily, you're pregnant? Wait, don't tell me. Is that why you resigned?" As soon as those words landed, James's eyes widened. For the first time, his usually composed expression cracked. "You resigned?" After finishing my meeting with HR and completing my resignation paperwork, it was already time to clock out. As I left the research institute, I spotted James standing alone beneath a tree in the distance. He quickly walked toward me. Do you have time? We need to talk. Talk about what? Two things, he said calmly. First, we need to confirm whether you're actually pregnant. Second, we need to discuss why you're quitting your job. His tone was clear and businesslike, as if this was just another research project to be analyzed. There wasn't a hint of emotion in his voice. Work was already frustrating enough, and hearing this from him only made it worse. Did you forget that we're already divorced? My decisions have nothing to do with you. The words ex-husband made James Carter's expression darken slightly. For the first time, I felt like I had finally won a battle. I had submitted my resignation to my supervisor long ago, and the reason behind it was almost laughable. It all started one evening after working late. On my way home, I passed by a bakery and saw a stack of discounted bread that was about to be thrown out. Caught my attention. The day after I had asked James for a divorce, he had buried himself in work at the lab. As if nothing had happened, I bought all the remaining bread and sat alone on the curb, tearing into it, bite after bite. I realized the bread was starting to taste sour. Only then did I notice. My tears had soaked into it. It was an overwhelming, indescribable exhaustion. I had joined the research institute just to be closer to James, and it seemed like for years, everything I did was to stay close to him. Even though I found the research tedious and exhausting, even though the atmosphere at the institute was suffocating, even though the cafeteria food was awful and the location was inconvenient, I had endured it all. Only someone like James, who could tolerate absolute solitude, could fit in here. Yet, I had once dreamed of baking the most delicious bread in the world. That night, as I sat on the sidewalk, I suddenly realized something. The very next day, I submitted my resignation. In the span of just 3 days, I had made two of the biggest decisions of my life, divorce and quitting my job. But as I walked home that evening, my steps felt lighter. I waved at James, said goodbye, then turned and left. Just as I reached the bus stop, the bus pulled in, right on time. But after getting on, I couldn't resist looking back through the window. He was still standing there, unmoving. Then, in the next second, he suddenly crouched down, curling in on himself, his face buried in his hands. I couldn't see his expression. Humph. Serves you right. Go ahead and regret losing me. For 3 days, I locked myself in my apartment, doing nothing but sleep. On the 4th day, I finally told my best friend about my job resignation. She was thrilled and declared that I had finally escaped my misery. That night, she dragged me to a bar to celebrate. Unfortunately, I couldn't drink. Yesterday, I had gone to the hospital for a checkup. Turns out, I really was pregnant. My emotions were complicated, to say the least. Until I figured out what I wanted to do, I decided to just go with the flow. You should have told me earlier. If you're not drinking, why do you even come to a bar? My best friend rolled her eyes at me, then glanced at a nearby sign. Look, you can get a free drink if you sing a song. Back in high school, I had been one of the top 10 singers in our school and even knew how to play the guitar. This was nothing. So, I walked up to the stage, borrowed a guitar, and started playing. By the time I finished, the whole bar was cheering. My best friend happily went to claim her free drink. I had just returned the guitar when I turned around, and immediately locked eyes with James Carter. What the hell was he doing here? Seeing James Carter in a bar was as shocking as finding a monster in bed with Ultraman. After all these years of marriage, I had never seen him interested in anything remotely fun. The dance floor was packed with people swaying and moving to the music. But James stood out like a sore thumb. White dress shirt, black dress pants, buttoned up to the very top. Completely out of place in this environment. Yet, his sharp features were impossible to ignore. Many people were already sneaking glances at him. Ignoring the stares, James walked straight toward me. His brows furrowed in confusion. Why didn't you tell me? His voice was low and controlled, but I knew exactly what he meant. Didn't we get divorced? I came to a bar. Is that really such a big deal? Besides, how did he even know I was here? James lifted his phone and showed me the screen. I saw your location. It was a post from my social media. Why did you come to a bar? This place is full of all kinds of people. What are you even doing here? His nagging tone annoyed me instantly. Just as I was about to argue back, he suddenly raised his phone and, right in front of me, transferred $50,000 into my account. If you need money, why didn't you tell me? Did you really have to take a singing job at a bar? As he continued lecturing me about how unsafe it was to work in a bar, his fingers never stopped typing, making another transfer. I had already received $200,000 in my account. Tomorrow, I'll get a lawyer to redistribute the assets. I'll transfer the 1.600 square foot house on the east side of the city to you. I was so shocked by this sudden windfall that I couldn't react for a moment. Swallowing hard, I tried to process what had just happened. Our divorce settlement had gone smoothly, with James Carter willingly giving me the majority of the assets. And now, he was adding a whole house to that? Just like that, I had suddenly become a wealthy woman. Of course, he must have misunderstood something. But who cares? Money is money. Happily accepting the money, I started planning for my new bakery. During this time, James and I completed the property transfer at the real estate office. As soon as we stepped out, I was about to hail a cab when he suddenly called out to me, "Are you really pregnant?" His voice was calm, but there was a certain weight to his words. "What do you plan to do about the baby?" I hadn't decided yet, but one thing was certain. This had nothing to do with him anymore. It's none of your business. But I'm the father. Legally speaking, you're not. Biologically speaking, the baby isn't even born yet. It's not even considered a biological entity yet. James opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but before he could, my phone rang. It was the construction crew. The plumbing in my shop had burst, and instead of fixing it, the workers had just run off. My brand new store was now a flooded mess. On the way back, I frantically called the renovation manager over and over, but all of his numbers were turned off. When I finally arrived, I was met with absolute chaos, water everywhere, repairs in progress, and the overwhelming frustration of dealing with unreliable workers. Thankfully, my best friend rushed over to help, and after a long and exhausting evening, we finally got things somewhat under control. Just as I was about to sit down and take a breath, my phone rang again. Assuming it was the renovation manager, I didn't even check the caller ID before answering. "Stop bothering me. If you cared this much, why didn't you call earlier? Where were you when everything went wrong? And now you suddenly remember me? You think I can't manage without you? Let me tell you, I can replace you in an instant. Get lost." Hanging up the phone, I let out a deep breath, feeling much better after venting. That was until I glanced at the screen and saw the name on the caller ID. James Carter. Great. Not feeling so good anymore. By the time I tried calling him back, his phone was turned off. The renovation company eventually agreed to compensate me for the damages and assigned a new project manager, a surprisingly young and handsome guy. I had my hands full overseeing the renovation, spending every day running around the shop, exhausted and covered in dust. Few days later, I received a call from my former research supervisor. "Emily, do you know where James is? He didn't come to work today, and he's been acting off lately. Did something happen?" Of the few people who knew about our past marriage, my supervisor was one of them, but as far as he knew, we were still together. When I stayed silent, he seemed to realize something. "Did you too?" He paused before finishing the question. "We're divorced." There was a long silence on the other end of the line before he muttered, "I see. Sorry about that." Then, he hung up. I sat there, watching the workers install tiles, but my mind was elsewhere. Where had James gone? He was someone who never slacked off. In all the years he had worked, he had never been late, let alone absent. If James Carter could be described in one word, it would be machine-like. Back in high school, despite already securing early admission to a top university, he still studied harder than anyone else. He was always the first to arrive in the classroom in the morning and the last to leave at night. Even in college, he never slowed down, either attending classes or competing in academic competitions. He was always too busy. So busy that we never had time for romantic walks in the park. So busy that we never just sat down to watch a movie together. Once, I had finally convinced him to take a break and go for a walk along the river with me. The night breeze was perfect, the atmosphere just right. And for the first time, we sat shoulder to shoulder on a bench, alone, with no distractions. It was the perfect moment. I had wanted to kiss him for so long. But just as I was about to make a move, he fell asleep. I nudged his shoulder, but he didn't stir. Instead, he instinctively pulled me closer, burying his head in the crook of my neck. I heard him mumble something incoherently. Just, let me lean on you for a little while. I'm sorry. There were dark circles under his eyes. I wasn't sure if that sorry was for falling asleep in the middle of our date, or for feeling guilty about taking even a moment to rest. When we were married, I had met James Carter's father once. He was a rigid, serious man, but when he spoke about his son, his face was filled with pride. He is where he is today because of me. Since he was a child, I taught him to be like a tightly wound string, never to slack off, not even for a second. But a string that is pulled too tight for too long will eventually snap. I sat inside my shop, watching the workers install tiles all afternoon. As I was about to leave, the new renovation manager offered to drive me home. On the way, we discussed the shop's lighting design until the car stopped at my apartment complex. He got out quickly to open the door for me. Don't worry, Emily, you're my first client, so I'll do everything I can to meet your expectations. I smiled and nodded just as my phone rang. It was James. Since the last time he turned off his phone, we hadn't spoken once. I had barely opened my mouth when he cut me off. What are you doing? I hadn't even asked why he skipped work today, yet he was already questioning me first. Glancing at a stray dog sunbathing by the road, I casually blurted out, feeding the street dogs. Oh? Then why don't you have that 6-foot-tall dog next to you say hello to his ex-brother-in-law? My head shot up. Standing right outside my building was James Carter, gripping his phone tightly and glaring at me with an expression so stormy it could set fire to the air. The young renovation manager noticed his expression and immediately panicked. Emily, I'll get going now. Don't worry. Your shop is in good hands. He practically yelled before bolting away. By the time I looked back at James, his expression had softened somewhat. He followed me upstairs, still holding onto a bag of groceries. What are you doing here? I frowned. I just happened to be passing by after work. I bought too many groceries and thought I might not finish them in time. I didn't even bother pointing out how terrible his lie was. He walked straight into my kitchen and started putting things away. Then, without asking, he started cooking. I had never been good in the kitchen. The only thing I could make was bread and pastries. Lately, I had either been ordering takeout or eating at my best friend's place. Now that I had a free personal chef, why would I say no? James moved quickly, and before long, 3 dishes and a soup were placed on the table. I casually asked if he wanted to stay for dinner, expecting him to decline. Instead, he had already set out 2 bowls and chopsticks like it was the most natural thing in the world. Dinner was silent, save for the sound of chewing. In the past, I would have filled the silence with endless chatter. James was never great at conversation. If I didn't talk, he wouldn't speak a word. But if I did, he would always respond, though I was never sure if he actually wanted to talk, or if he was just being polite. Just like how I could never figure out whether he had ever truly liked me, or if he just accepted me because I had chased him for too long. The quiet was unbearable. I pulled out my phone to watch a movie while eating. Before I could hit play, James suddenly spoke. You're really opening your own shop? I nodded. He fell silent again for a long while before finally saying, That's good. I had thought he was going to say something profound, but in the end, he sounded like a socially awkward AI. Frustrated, I ate faster, aggressively picking up food. In my rush, I accidentally grabbed some chili peppers and threw them into my bowl. Noticing this, James immediately spoke up. You're pregnant. You should eat less spicy food. I froze for a moment, then shot him a glare. That's none of your business. He put down his chopsticks, his expression serious as he looked me straight in the eye. Regardless of whether you decide to keep this child, I will take responsibility. There it was again. That same line he had said before we got married. James Carter and I had one too many drinks that night. One thing led to another, and we ended up in bed together. When I woke up the next morning, he was no longer beside me. Instead, he stood alone on the balcony, and from the looks of it, He had been there for a while. He had plucked all the spines from my cactus and stuck them into my succulents. Seeing me wake up, the first thing he said was, "I'll take responsibility for last night. Let's get married." I had already tied him down once before. I wasn't about to do it a second time. "I don't need you to take responsibility," I said calmly. "I'm doing just fine on my own. I don't want to interfere with your life anymore. And I don't want to hold you back." I got up and walked to the balcony to water my plants. James looked up at me, his gaze filled with emotions I couldn't decipher. Maybe I never truly understood him. Or I would have realized long ago that his dream had always been to work abroad. I had been the one holding him back all these years. He silently went to the kitchen and started cleaning. After scrubbing the stove until it gleamed, he finally ran out of excuses to stay. When I told him to take the trash out on his way out, he picked up the bag and stood at the door. Just as I was about to say goodbye, he suddenly gripped the door frame. "I have one last thing to say." "What?" His fingers tightened around the doorknob, his knuckles turning white. Just as my patience was about to run out, he finally spoke. "You never held me back." A month after my shop's renovations began, my mom finally found out about my resignation and divorce. That very day, she flew over to see me. I took her to my shop, which was still under construction, and walked her through my plans for the space. She listened quietly, not interrupting until I was done. Then, she took my hand and squeezed it tightly. "I'm sorry," she said, repeating it over and over. "I shouldn't have pushed you to follow in his footsteps when you and James got together." When I first started dating James, my mom didn't have much of a reaction. After all, he was handsome, smart, and had a clear vision for his future. In contrast, back then, my only dream was to bake the best bread in the world. But aside from taking a few baking classes, I hadn't taken any concrete steps toward that goal. James was the one who led me into graduate school. James was the one who brought me into the research institute. Thanks to him, I had landed a high-paying job that others envied. Even my mom used to think I had made the right choice in love. "Your dad and I couldn't sleep last night. We stayed up talking, wondering if we were too strict with you. Maybe that's why you've been suppressing yourself for so long," she said, then pulled me into a tight hug. "You look so exhausted. I didn't realize it until I saw you just now. I'm sorry. Doing something you don't love must have been really tiring. No matter what you choose to do next, your mom will support you." My nose tingled, and before I knew it, my eyes blurred with tears. I buried my face in her shoulder and sobbed softly. Of course, I didn't have the heart to tell her that my exhaustion was actually from staying up until 3 a.m. playing video games the night before. She patted my back, comforting me over and over. "It's okay. Losing James isn't the end of the world. I'll find you someone even better." Through my muffled sobs, I muttered, "That's going to be tough." Men who were as good-looking and as brilliant as James Carter weren't easy to come by. Compared to some of my former colleagues at the Research Institute, most of whom were balding with thick glasses, James stood out like a damn model. Whenever the institute needed promotional photos, they would always pick him to be the face of the campaign. He was, without a doubt, the department's unofficial visual ambassador. "No matter how hard it is, your mom will find you someone," she promised, wiping my tears. I sniffled and shook my head. She hugged me even tighter. "You really can't let go, can you? Does it have to be him?" Unable to hold it in any longer, I finally pushed her away and blurted out, "Mom, you're stepping on my foot." She had been pressing down on it this whole time, and she didn't even notice? Awkwardly, she let out a dry laugh. To cheer me up, she started introducing me to eligible bachelors. But as it turned out, meeting someone too extraordinary in your youth really does ruin dating for the rest of your life. The moment you part ways, the gap between what was and what is becomes impossible to ignore. After meeting 4 or 5 men, I was exhausted. Thankfully, my mom never framed them as blind dates. She just introduced them as friends' kids, which made turning them down easier. Most of the attractive ones were empty-headed. The smart ones, well, let's just say their looks were an acquired taste. At least I was financially stable now, with a monthly income of $15,000. I could support myself and a second person comfortably if needed. I don't have many hobbies. If I date someone, I just hope she stays home and takes care of me. The buzzing in my ears grew louder. I couldn't help but interrupt him. Sorry, but a few years ago, my monthly salary was already higher than yours. Also, I don't cook. The man across from me stared, completely speechless. As I left the cafe, I heard him mutter under his breath, "How is that even possible? A woman not knowing how to cook is one thing, but earning that much money? There's no way that money is clean." I couldn't be bothered to argue. Stepping outside, I planned to take a walk to clear my head, but just as I looked ahead, I saw James Carter standing not too far away, with a woman next to him. Instinctively, I checked today's date. It was the weekend. Maybe he was just meeting a friend. We were divorced. It had nothing to do with me. I turned around and walked in the opposite direction, my steps sluggish, like a turtle dragging its feet. The sky was overcast, and it looked like it might rain at any moment. If only it had been this kind of weather on the day of our divorce. It would have suited the mood better. No, I was still thinking about it too much. I snuck another glance over my shoulder, telling myself it was nothing. But this time, my eyes met James's directly. Busted. I had been caught staring. He froze for a second before walking straight toward me. "It's going to rain. Let me take you home." We walked side by side. At some point, the drizzle began to fall. It reminded me of something from last year. That day, I had gone out shopping and saw two couples walking past me, all lovey-dovey and affectionate. On a whim, I sent James a message. "If I turned into a cockroach, would you still like me?" His reply was short and to the point. "It's going to rain. Did you bring an umbrella? Come home early." Classic James Carter. Getting him to say anything romantic was harder than climbing Mount Everest. He was never good with words, but his beautiful face made up for it. I had put away my phone and hurried home, only to find him rushing out with an umbrella just as I reached the entrance of our apartment complex. "Where are you going?" I had asked. He had been clearly flustered, still catching his breath. "I thought you didn't bring an umbrella. I was coming to get you." "Are you stupid? If I didn't have an umbrella, wouldn't I just call you?" "But you didn't reply to my message." There had been a hint of grievance in his voice when he said that. Later that night, I finally checked my phone and realized that 2 minutes after his initial reply, he had sent another message. "Why didn't you reply? Wait, did you really turn into a cockroach? Wouldn't you get washed away in the rain? Forget it. I'll just come get you." It had James Carter's unique sense of deadpan humor all over it. He was never one for sweet words. His care for me was always hidden in those everyday reminders. "Can I see your shop?" His sudden request brought me back to the present. He had stopped walking, looking at me with a quiet, expectant gaze. I nodded and led him there. The major renovations were done. Now, I was just waiting for the furniture and counters to arrive. He didn't step inside, just stood at the door, looking around. I was about to introduce the layout when he spoke first. "It looks good." He paused before adding, "At least I didn't hold you back." "You never held me back." The words left my mouth before I even processed them. I stood there, momentarily dazed. What were we even doing? Shouldn't divorced couples just go their separate ways? Later that night, I asked my best friend, "Why do two people who are already divorced still talk like this?" She was in the middle of a game and didn't even look up. "What else could it be? You guys are going to get back together." "No way," I blurted out, shaking my head so fast I could have given myself whiplash. Just then, the sound of game over echoed from her phone. Annoyed, she tossed it aside and glared at me. "You refuse to go on blind dates, but you can sit down and have normal conversations with your ex-husband. And don't forget, you've got a baby on the way. Either get back together or..." Before she could finish, I instinctively clutched my stomach and backed away. I was terrified of pain. And childbirth? Even worse. She rolled her eyes and kicked me lightly in the shin. My best friend and I were bickering when the owner of the shop next door knocked on my glass door, interrupting my latest experiment with a new red date dessert soup. "I made a new batch of red date soup. Want to try some?" The neighboring shop specialized in herbal dessert soups, and lately, they had been developing new recipes, mostly drinks that were good for blood circulation and overall health. The owner never stayed long, just dropping off his samples before heading back. Aren't you guys competitors? Why is he being so nice to you? My best friend warned me, eyeing him suspiciously. I rolled my eyes. Ever heard the saying a close neighbor is better than a distant relative? We're just being neighborly. You're way too trusting. Watch out. Or one day, someone will wreck your shop. My best friend had a bit of a doomsayer's gift. Not long after, my shop really did get wrecked. But it wasn't the shop owner next door. It was one of the guys my mom had set me up with for a blind date. I remembered him all too well. He had taken me out for a $3 bubble tea and spent 5 minutes switching between 3 different payment apps before finally pulling out $1 in cash. I couldn't stand it anymore and paid for both of us, including his drink. Then he had the audacity to say, "If I had known you were paying, I would have ordered the most expensive one." Even the teenage cashier rolled her eyes at that. "I don't really drink these kinds of things anyway," he had added. "Only women like fancy, impractical stuff. Just look. Cheap lunchboxes under $5 are always bought by men. But $10 bubble teas? Women love them." I had no idea what sins I had committed in my past life to deserve this. I immediately texted my mom. "Where the hell did you even find this guy?" He kept going. "I heard you used to work at a research institute. That kind of job isn't great. Too many male colleagues. Men and women should be careful around each other." Careful. Whenever we were fighting over lab equipment, we didn't even see each other as people, let alone men and women. If we could have stolen all the best tools for ourselves, we would have done it in a heartbeat. And women shouldn't study so much. I had reached my limit. I slammed my hand on the table. No mirror at home? Ever looked at your own reflection in a puddle? At least? You think you have the right to judge me? A frog critiquing humans. Unbelievable. I stormed out without looking back. But apparently, he hadn't taken the rejection well. After a string of failed blind dates, he happened to walk past my shop today and saw me. And then he lost it. "You must have talked bad about me to those women. That's why none of them want to date me. You women are all the same." Angry, I rolled up my sleeves, ready to fight. My best friend immediately stepped between us. Realizing he was losing, the guy suddenly grabbed a wooden stool from the shop and slammed it onto the ground, breaking it into pieces. He was just about to charge at me when someone stepped in front of me first. "Sir, I've already called the police." James Carter twisted the guy's wrist behind his back in one swift motion. The guy immediately yelped in pain. I hadn't expected James to be here. I barely had time to process it before the guy started screaming, begging James to let go. James actually loosened his grip. But the moment he did, the guy swung his fist, landing a punch squarely on James's temple. "Damn it. You just let go when I tell you to? How stupid are you?" It was a solid hit. James collapsed to the floor instantly. The guy was arrested, and James was rushed to the hospital. He woke up not long after, but my heart was still lodged in my throat when I leaned over him. "Do you remember who I am?" He stared at me in confusion. My stomach dropped. No way. Had he forgotten me? Had all my years of effort been for nothing? He studied me for a long moment before finally speaking. "Why are you asking such a dumb question?" Okay, at least he wasn't suffering from amnesia. The doctor suggested keeping him under observation for the night. Hospitals always felt a bit cold at night. We sat on a bench in the corridor, and James wordlessly took off his jacket and handed it to me. As he moved, I caught a glimpse of something on his neck. I grabbed his collar instinctively, but the moment I saw what was hanging around his neck, I froze. It was our wedding ring, strung on a silver chain. "Why didn't you sell it?" I quickly pulled my hand back, regretting my impulsiveness. He glanced down at it. "I already bought it. Might as well keep it as a souvenir." I leaned against the wall, my thoughts drifting back to the time before our wedding. James Carter had said he would take responsibility. It wasn't the response I had wanted, but in the end, he still did what I had hoped for. He married me. On the day of our wedding, we went to see our new home. Then came meeting the parents, arranging the reception, and everything else that followed. But when it was time to buy our rings, we were running out of money. Of course, I just had to fall in love with the most expensive ring at first sight. The moment I saw the price, my jaw almost hit the floor. Without hesitation, I put it back and dragged James out of the store. We had spent half a month looking at rings, going through dozens of options, but none of them felt right. Then, on Christmas Eve, James asked me what I wanted as a gift. Without thinking, I joked, "I just want to finally find the perfect ring." The next morning, I woke up to a small box on my bedside table. Inside was the same ring I had thought was too expensive to buy. He had sold his car to get it for me. I had felt guilty, torn between happiness and regret. But even then, I couldn't tell if the ring was more important or if the car was. I asked the salesperson, "This model is a limited edition. Once it's gone forever," James had said. "But there will always be more cars in the future." Then he had pulled me into his arms and whispered into my ear, "Just like how I'll meet many people in life, but you're the only one who truly matters." His words sent a shiver down my spine, making my heart melt. I had been so touched that I cried like an idiot. For a while, we relied on a little electric scooter to get around. It didn't last long. 6 months later, James received a patent payment and bought an even better car. But I had still preferred riding on that little scooter, because every time the wind brushed past us, I would remember what he had said, that I was the most important person in his life. On the day of our divorce, I had returned that ring to him, and now, it was back in front of me again. Without realizing it, we had leaned against each other. The hospital lobby was nearly empty. It was just the two of us. "James, do you think I held you back?" When I found out that his dream had always been to work abroad, my first thought was that I had been the one keeping him from it. His father had certainly blamed me. "If it weren't for you, my son would have been a world-class scientist by now. He would be rich, successful. It's all your fault." I had been to James's childhood home before, a rundown house where he and his father had lived alone. The largest and best room in the house had been his, filled with all the hopes and dreams his father had for him. He had worked so hard to get out of that place, to carve out a better future for himself. But in the end, he had stayed because of me. Was I? No. James cut me off without hesitation, under the oversized coat draped over me. He tightened his grip around my hand. "Emily, I never once thought you held me back. If anything, I think I was the one who held you back." His voice was low, firm. "When you told me your dream was to bake the best bread in the world, I knew I had ruined you. I shouldn't have made you follow in my footsteps. I wanted you to get your master's, to join the research institute, because I was selfish. I just wanted to be close to you. But in doing that, I hurt you. I knew you weren't happy at work. Yet I still wanted you to stay. You should have been free. But instead, I was the one who trapped you." Before I had asked for a divorce, James had suddenly become incredibly busy. So busy that he barely had time to talk to me. I had been drowning in work, suffocating, losing sleep. And then, one night, his father called me. I had always known his father didn't like me, but I had never cared. After all, even my own mother and I fought all the time. So every time his father spoke to me in that condescending, passive-aggressive way, I had always snapped back. He had learned to stop picking fights with me. But that night, when he called, James had been in the middle of waiting for an important set of experiment results. He hadn't come home yet. The moment I answered the call, a furious voice erupted from the other end. "It's all your fault. You ruined my son's future. You stopped him from going abroad. I hate you." His words were jumbled, but I could piece together the emotions behind them. I wasn't a trash can. I had no obligation to accept his emotional outbursts. I hung up. But after that, I couldn't sleep no matter how hard I tried. Later, I asked James Carter if he had ever truly wanted to go abroad. He nodded. For a long time, yeah, I really wanted to. So I had held him back. If love was only going to fade and turn into resentment in the future, wouldn't it be better to part ways now and leave each other with dignity? "You don't blame me for stopping you from going abroad?" I asked. He glanced at me and said flatly, "If I had truly wanted to leave, do you think you could have stopped me? It was always my own choice." Then, he rolled up the sleeve of his left arm, revealing an ugly, jagged scar. I had asked him about it before, but he had never given me an answer. "Back then, I wanted to go abroad just to get away from him," he said. So I lied. I told him there was a great job waiting for me overseas, that it was my dream, but it was all fake. I just wanted to run. I listened in silence. At some point, he realized I had a talent for studying. That one day, I make a lot of money. That I could erase his shame. James took a deep breath before continuing. The year my mom died, he had no money for her treatment. He went door to door, begging on his knees. But in the end, she still passed away. And he never forgot it. When I was a kid, I didn't care about school. He'd beat me for it. The worst time was when I sneaked off to the river with the neighbor's kids to catch fish. When I got back, he grabbed a knife and threatened to cut off my hands. That's when I got this scar. I reached out, running my fingers over the rough, uneven tissue. His arm trembled slightly under my touch. It felt as though I was touching the wounds of his younger self. Eventually, I realized that dream was impossible. If I hadn't met you, I might have ended up in that river. Or maybe just lost somewhere. Nowhere at all. His voice was quiet now. I was too tired to hold on. Before I met you, I had thought about ending my life more times than I can count. But you pulled me back from the edge. You were the rope that kept me from falling. We leaned into each other. For the first time, we spoke openly, without any walls between us. Thinking about the past 10 years, all the effort I had put in just to keep up with him, I suddenly felt wronged. Yes, I had become better because of it. But I was so exhausted. Do you have any idea how hard I worked just to keep up with you? I muttered. I was terrified of falling behind. Even for a second. James stiffened slightly, staring at me in shock. But your mom said. She said you were ambitious. That you used to like other guys. But once you surpassed them, you lost interest. I was momentarily stunned before my irritation flared. I should kiss you right now. Do you know how much suffering you put me through? Then, I sighed dramatically. But you're lucky. You've got this face. I can forgive a lot because of this face. He laughed. A rare, genuine chuckle. What if one day I'm not good looking anymore? He teased. I'd still like you. Why? Because you're James Carter. Love comes without warning. And once it takes root, it's impossible to erase. By the time I realized it, I had already fallen hopelessly, irreversibly in love with him. James went silent for a moment. Then, he reached up and unclasped the silver chain around his neck. In his palm was the wedding ring we had once worn. The inside of the band still had our names engraved on it, along with a single word, forever. When he slid the ring back onto my finger, I felt something tighten in my chest. It was as if my finger was connected directly to my heart, and I could feel its every beat. His fingers curled around mine, the warmth of his hand seeping into my skin. Then, behind us, someone coughed awkwardly. We turned to see a nurse standing there, looking slightly embarrassed. Visiting hours are over, she said. If there are no issues, you're free to leave. I grabbed James's arm and pulled him up. As we walked away, I could hear the nurse mumbling under her breath. Geez, I've never seen a couple confess their feelings in a hospital before. What a public display of affection. As soon as we stepped into the elevator, James Carter didn't press the button for the first floor. There's something I never told you, he said quietly. My father was hospitalized a while ago. Do you want to see him? I was taken aback. The man who had once scolded me so fiercely, how had he suddenly fallen ill? The elevator descended to the 18th floor before James leaned against my shoulder and spoke again. His voice barely above a whisper. He wasn't doing well even before we got divorced. Cancer. He doesn't have much time left. So that was why James had been so busy back then. I know your relationship with him wasn't good, so I avoided bringing him up in front of you. Through the small window in the hospital door, I caught a glimpse of James's father lying in bed. He was already asleep. For James, this man was both love and burden. He had given his son everything. His expectations, his ambition, his entire world. But he had also caged him, suffocating him under the weight of endless pressure. 3 months later, James's father passed away. His condition had deteriorated too quickly. There was nothing anyone could do. At the same time, my bakery had just opened for business. The neighboring shop owner came by with a gift. Bird's Nest dessert soup. Only then did I learn that James had prepaid for a long-term subscription with him, making sure I would get nourishing drinks delivered every day. I was still processing that when James called. He's gone. The funeral was simple, just as his father had requested. He had never been a social man, and he didn't have many friends. The only thing he left behind was $20,000, tucked away in a bank account. The password was James's birthday. From start to finish, James Carter never shed a single tear. But I could see the sorrow he was holding back, the quiet grief pressing down on him. He had lost both of his parents. As we walked away from the cemetery, he suddenly pulled me into a tight embrace. For the first time, I heard him cry. Soft, restrained, but real. I only have you now. His fingers brushed against my growing belly. Then, through his tears, he let out a quiet laugh. No, it's not just us anymore. It's all of us. The bakery became my daily routine, filling my life with the scent of fresh bread and the warmth of kneading dough. Every morning, I woke up early to test new recipes, my hands coated in flour, my apron smudged with sugar. It was a simple, fulfilling life, the one I had always dreamed of. James Carter never left. First, he showed up occasionally, making excuses like, I was just passing by, or I needed coffee. But over time, his visits became a daily occurrence. He'd sit in his usual spot by the window, working on his laptop, occasionally glancing up to watch me. One evening, as I was locking up, I turned to him and asked, Aren't you going home? He looked at me and, without hesitation, said, I am home. I didn't respond. I couldn't, because deep down, I had always known he was never going to leave again. As my belly grew, James took on more responsibilities, fussing over me in a way that made my best friend tease me relentlessly. He's practically your personal assistant now, she joked. I'm just making sure she doesn't overwork herself. James responded matter-of-factly, adjusting the pillow behind my back. One night, after a long day, I sat on the couch with my feet propped up. James knelt in front of me, gently massaging my swollen ankles. You don't have to do this, I muttered. I want to. You spoil me too much. Then let me keep spoiling you. His fingers traced slow, careful circles against my skin. Emily, he murmured, his voice soft. Let's get married again. I stiffened. Why? Because I never stopped loving you. My throat tightened. James, I don't want you to marry me just because of the baby. He smiled. I'm not. I'm marrying you because I can't imagine a life without you. I looked at him, at the man who had once been my husband, my greatest challenge, my deepest love, and I realized something. I had never stopped loving him either. We didn't have a grand wedding this time. No extravagant banquet. No expensive rings. Just a simple ceremony at City Hall, with my best friend as the witness and a tiny gold band on my finger. Afterward, James held my hand as we walked through the city, the late autumn air crisp and cool. Any regrets? He asked. I squeezed his fingers. Not a single one. He smiled, pressing a kiss to my forehead. Me neither. A few months later, in the quiet hours of the morning, our baby was born. Tiny, wrinkled, crying bundle, with James's dark eyes and my stubbornness. He held our child with the same careful hands he once used to hold fragile lab equipment, his expression unreadable. Then, in the softest voice, he whispered, Welcome to the world. I watched him, my heart full. We had taken the long road back to each other, filled with missteps and regrets. But in the end, we had found our way home. Together. And this time, we weren't letting go.